365 Sports. I'm going to read the summaries under each team, just like 1 or 2 sentences.
Yeah, no, it's a cool thing to look at. I didn't really know how to, ask a question, really, because it's because he kind of answered it when he said, it's about continuity as much as anything, is just having the same coaching staff in place so long as they're producing talent. They stick, Matt Rule has stuck around Baylor these last couple of years. We saw what the class was last year. I would think that they'd probably have more than the one they had this year just because they would have kept recruiting and kept developing guys. But you had the interruption, and so you had the tail end of his guys and now the beginning of Aranda. And, Aranda's going to, take some time. It's taken some time, and we'll see. I think next year will be a key indicator of how well guys are developing under this staff because it'll be a good sample size at this point. But, yeah, if you have disruption – then that's going to, interrupt a lot of things. And the smaller the school, I think the more of the disruption that it can be because you're already struggling to get that high-level NFL type of talent to begin with. At least if you take over it, any number of the Blue Bloods, you still got that to lean on no matter who your coach is. He has to be a real to, not get talent to that Georgia or, any number of the 25, schools that are considered the upper echelon or whatever. Whereas at a Baylor, you better have a dang good coach to bring in that talent and develop that talent and then spit out that talent and then to do it over and over again. So you throw a little monkey wrench in there and turn over staffs every 3 or 4 years like they were doing there for about a stretch. And, yeah, you're going to have 6 last year and you're going to have 1 guy this year and you're going to have maybe 1 next year, maybe 3. We can't really know, but a lot of places, there's 5, 6 guys year in, year out.
No matter what.
And they're set up pretty well, yeah.
Now, here's what they said about each program. Baylor, I mentioned that. They took home the best at 4-star U, which means that they cultivated 38% of their 4-star players got drafted. But pretty average elsewhere. On-the-field results have been impressive, though, with 3 different football coaches.
Yeah, they don't really get 5 stars.
They've had 3 in this 11-year period.
Yeah, and one was Robbie Rhodes,
and he was
never
kicked
did
off.
anything. Yeah. One was Javonte. Was Javonte? No, he's a 4-star. He was a 4-star.
What was Corey Coleman?
He was a 4-star.
Okay.
I'm trying to think. Who was the other 2 5s?
Stidham,
yeah, he was.
Maybe.
I think he was he was not a 5 on every service, I don't think. He was a 4 on 1 or 2. He was not a undisputed 5-star.
Yeah. Robbie Rhodes for sure, and then Robbie Rhodes just eventually was asked to leave the campus because he couldn't stop from smoking pot.
Yeah. I'll have to look that up. I don't even remember, because it could have been a Devin Duvernay who signed and then didn't even play. I don't remember the.
Oh, no. How about the lineman from Silsbee?
Patrick Hudson
might have been, who went to Texas and it just.
But I don't know if they count those because those guys didn't even end up playing.
True. All right, Iowa State Cyclones have enjoyed some on-field success, but only Kansas has been a worse place to develop in the NFL draft. ISU didn't meet the minimum thresholds to be ranked in the 4- and 5-star rate, but the 3-star rate was astoundingly low based on what Matt Campbell has accomplished, one of the surprises from our data.
Yeah, they don't put a ton of guys out there. They don't. And, part of that's kind of their history. But I think that was a really big deal. They had a first-rounder this year. That's a huge, especially when you look at that. To have a guy go in the first round with Will McDonald is, I think read the stat yesterday. It was the first time in, 50 years or something like that they've had somebody in the first round. So that's a huge deal for them.
Stidham was, and according to an article I just Googled it, a 5-star player out of Stephenville. Kansas, no Power 5 program has endured a more difficult decade than them, and the draft rate only offers more evidence of a reality anyone paying attention to college football could see. They do have – you think what's going to happen with the quarterback? Where's he going to be?
I need to see him play more.
Okay. All right. Well, that's a good point.
He was good last year, but, then he was gone and didn't play forever. And, he's a fun player, but I have no idea on how he stacks up as a prospect in the NFL or anything like that. I don't know.
I did see RG3 on his social media today, showed a clip. He said that, look, the prototypical quarterback they're changing. So look, if Bryce Young is at 5'10" and can be the number 1 overall pick and mobile because he can make things happen, then I think Daniels has a future in the NFL. At least
and he's
potentially.
Very young.
Yeah, but we'll see. Part of it is, look, it's about durability. Bryce Young can have 3 great years and then wind up being a bust because he got hurt. Because he's smaller. I mean,
someone compared Russell Wilson was thick. And he had he was very elusive, very quick twitch. But Bryce Young's not as big thickness-wise as a Russell Wilson.
Not close.
No, yeah, absolutely. And, look, Kyler Murray's issue outside of his personality, I guess, is also, look, that's a little dude.
Yeah.
And the guys that they don't hire guys that are the same athlete to go chase you. They hire guys that are big, fast, strong athletes to go chase you and throw you down.
He's usually pretty good about protecting himself, and I don't know if this last year all went south.
Yeah, I mean, he hurt it towards his ACL and missed the last 4 games of the season. And
don't forget those damn video games.
Yeah,
he may have
as a matter of fact,
a muscle in his thumb.
The weights. Here's how people around the league so far think of Kyler Murray right now going into next year is that if you look at anybody who's done the way too early mock draft, which is essentially just ranking the top 32 prospects.
I said this. Sorry, but Connor Galvin was a first-round pick on mock drafts last year. He just went undrafted.
Yeah. But it's way too. But the guy we probably know is going to be the first overall pick, unless he forgets completely how to play football, is going to be Caleb Williams.
Without question.
And the Cardinals are seen by most to maybe be the worst team going into next year, and that again remains to be seen.
And they have the Texans pick.
Yeah. And they have the Texans pick, and the Texans may not be that good. But Caleb Williams, if the people think that the Cardinals have the first pick in the draft, even after signing to Kyler Murray to an extension a year ago, less than it at this point, a year ago, they think that they'll take Caleb Williams and replace him. So
Kansas, that's a great point. Kansas State, don't get too excited about the 4- and 5-star ratings because there's not really much to go off of, but well short of the ranking threshold for each. Wildcats had the lowest overall draft rate among the teams that won a conference title during the 11-year span.
There's a bit of a caveat there. It's kind of among the teams that have won the conference. So, yeah, it's not as bad as it initially sounds, but they're about to change. I think that with the way it's all setting up now under Kleiman, that they're going to have, if we check back in 10 more years, then I think they'll be in a much different place.
They had a heck of a draft, especially with the first-round pick. Oklahoma. Failures with 5 stars surprising. 3 of their 12 5-stars were drafted, especially considering how much the Sooners have dominated the Big 12. Again, we know the last couple of years, not so much. Their overall draft rate, very strong, more reflective of the success Bob Stoops and Lincoln Riley enjoyed in Norman, and now it's on the clock with Brent Venables. Oklahoma State, been one of the Big 12's best programs during the past decade, produced some stars, but overall fell far below what they've done in the win-loss column. TCU transitioned to the Big 12 during the span we examined, the 11 years, struggled to develop 4 stars and were okay developing 3 stars. And see, that surprises me because I would think Baylor and TCU would have done really well in developing the 3 stars that they have.
Yeah, but I think TCU is getting a little tainted by this past year. Look at the several years. I mean, they beat Baylor on a regular basis, so we think of them differently in our heads.
They wake up and beat Baylor,
yeah. I mean, they do that right after they brush their teeth. But, outside of that, what great success. I mean, they had the year with Boykin, but that was 2014. That was a long time ago. These last few years, they've not been defined by it, but, we think of them and their highlight is they beat Baylor again. But you look at the rest of it, and it's not necessarily just spitting out talent and winning tons of games.
I thought they won 5 consecutive national titles because they've
It's the way you feel like. Yeah, exactly. But it's not quite that's really how it was.
You know what started to kind of creep in about Gary Patterson is because clearly, all these guys that were, we were talking Quentin Johnson, Max Duggan, all those guys were Gary Patterson recruits, but they were the guys that were going to the NFL from TCU. We're going to the NFL and getting, for the most part, better. Jalen Reagor notwithstanding, he didn't get his 5th-year option picked up today, by the way. But most of the guys, you'd see guys go to the NFL and then get a little bit better and play a little bit more, and you're like, oh, man. That means that
Yeah,
why are you losing? Like, if this guy's there,
dude,
it was
Josh Doxson, Trayvon Boykin. Like, a lot of the best players were not great pros.
But there's two ways of that. Like, you have guys who are going aren't great pros, or the other side of it is the last few years of Bobby Bowden, where you knew that Bobby needed some help, and to change things is he had guys go into the NFL and then they were better than they were in college, and you're like, well, why did you drop off? Because they were still getting these 4- and 5-star guys at FSU, but they weren't developing them in the same way, and like, what's going on there? Well, that's when you need to bring in a Jimbo Fisher and get a new look at your offense, because they were having guys go to the NFL and all of a sudden they're, holy cow, they're performing. Well, yeah, they were stud athletes who weren't being coached up the right way.
Yeah, I mean, TCU, if you look at their I mean, they've done really well for themselves. But that 2014-15 run when them and Baylor were hot and heavy, and then obviously all hell broke loose in Waco, and that changed everything. But they went from winning 10-plus games to then winning 6 and 16, and they bounced back and won 11 again in 17. But 18 through 21 until Patterson's firing, 7 wins, 5 wins, 6 wins, 5 wins. So there's a 4-year stretch where they were just kind of average and not making bowl games 2 out of those 4 years. So I think that leads to some of those numbers there where earlier in the decade, picks-wise, you're doing pretty well, and then maybe some of that tapered off. But, I mean, Oklahoma State's another team too. They had a little run where they were putting dudes in the pros at a high clip, and then I think some of those guys washed out, and there was a little bit of steam lost potentially there as well. That's just been a funky program to try and put your finger on Oklahoma State. I mean, they played for a conference title just a couple years ago.
And looked good doing it, too.
Yeah, it looked really good and could have won it, but it's hard to kind of pinpoint them.
Couple of more schools. Texas. No one, this is according to theathletic.com. Paxton will be interested to hear if Sandra Green's out there, what she has to say, too. No one who has watched the past decade of Texas football could be surprised the Longhorns were neck and neck with Oregon and Tennessee as the program that squandered the most talent during the span we examined, the 11 years. Horn's 3-star rate is maybe the most troublesome number when you compare it to the rate of most blue blood programs. Texas Tech, recruited in West Texas, has always been difficult. Red Raiders, 15 players drafted over 11 years. We examined 6 were drafted in either the 6th or 7th round. Of course, they had Tyree Wilson this year. And West Virginia has been relatively nondescript during the past decade. Mountaineers didn't crack the top or bottom 10 in either the hits or the misses category.
Texas is kind of like that friend you have that like loses money and then somehow still has money. Like how did you get all this?
What a great way to go to Vegas, huh?
But like you don't know how they like make bad business decisions but still have money. That's been Texas. Like, how do you have all this and then wind up with nothing, and then all of a sudden you're still in the game a little bit? It is